Hello, everyone. I hadn't added myself to the stage yet. There we go. That's all right. There's nobody here anyway. I got Red Fang in here. That's weird. It's so spooky, and there's Lord Red Fang, but okay, now I'm showing one viewer. Anyway, so a while back, I did a commentary on a video that Praise had done, and it was a video. It was a live stream that Praise did called "Biblical Slavery is an Invention of the Atheist. Prove me wrong." I always like those little challenges. Not really. What the Beck? Hello. Um, Forgive me, I'm a little rusty. I don't do a lot of streams anymore. While I was going through the video's still on my channel. It's just not up to view. I took it down because it was overly long. I was thinking about possibly doing an edited version, because there was some stuff that he brought up in the video that was just some of that stuff just kind of threw me. So I actually ended up having a conversation with Dr. Josh about some of the things that I wasn't real clear on, some of the misconceptions that Praise has about slavery in the Old Testament, whether it's endorsed or not. The interesting thing about the video, and I'll give everybody here a sample of it. If my computer decides to behave here. This was the video right here.
Go live.
So the usual Praise stuff.
Now we try new token. What does that really amount to? In verse 4 is actually the opposite of biblical hermeneutics, which just such a waste of time to even just to challenge me on that.
Let me go back a little bit more.
All right, I'm gonna see if this works here. What's up, my man Doki? God bless Polar Stream, Olive, Polar Family. God bless, brother. Absolutely a big lie from the atheist. It only stems from the atheist, and this is a challenge.
Oh, it doesn't.
If anyone wants to challenge me on that, I'll put the link in the chat. I want to see people demonstrate biblically that there can even be such a thing as biblical slavery.
It has been demonstrated. It's been demonstrated a lot. He just doesn't want to see it because he's got a way of going about this. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. What I am going to be doing, so in the process, so I watched this video's about a month old now, and I went through it, and I ended up sending emails to Dr. Josh, and then I eventually ended up talking to Dr. Josh on the phone and asking him some questions, and he goes, he told me, what I think would be funny is if you were to read my review of his book live. And I said, yeah, I thought about doing that, but I didn't want to do it. And so I told him I thought about reading your review because I remember he had sent it to me at one time, but I didn't want to do it without his permission, and other things happened, and I just didn't get around to doing it. And he goes, oh yeah, do it up. So he sent me another PDF copy of his review. It's short. I mean, it's decently long, but it's not like pages and pages and pages. Oh, there's my brother. Let me send him a message. Maybe he wants to. Maybe he'll join me for this. It ended up being so to go through everything that Praise does here. So okay, so I talked to Dr. Is like, yeah, do it up, and it's not real. I mean, it's got a decent length to it, but it's not like horrible. It's not an exhaustive critique of his book in any way. So for those that you don't know, Praise the I Am or Praise I Am. He wrote a book loosely attempting to debunk the notion of the Bible or the Old Testament endorsing slavery. Um, and the book is available on Amazon. I actually had a copy of it. Um, I think I still do have a copy of it on. I got it for free through I think through Kindle. I think it was available for free through Kindle. Um, but it was through their I can't remember. You sign up for it. It's the monthly Kindle thing, the Kindle Plus or whatever. And I got the book, and it was horribly formatted. It was really hard to read. It was just all over the fucking map. And so I was just like, well, forget this. I think I have a PDF copy of it from someone, but I don't know if I'd have to go back in my emails and see if I have it. But the book is not is not good. But and the whole reason that I was getting in this conversation with Dr. Josh was the fact that this claim from Prey saying, well, biblical slavery is an invention of the atheist. Prove me wrong. And without boring anyone with, I mean, I could go through some of this if people are interested in coming in and maybe going through some of it with me. We can. At the time I was doing it late at night, at least for my time, I was doing it late at night, and it ended up taking me down like a lot of rabbit holes. And I was like, well, maybe it'd be better if I just tried to do like some kind of edited content to, kind of, abbreviate it. But then I was like, is it really worth it? Probably not, because I don't get a lot of viewership anyway. So I basically just kind of let it go. I mean, I watched the majority of this. I think I watched like 2 hours and 10 minutes of this video. And the interesting thing about this particular about Praise's claim is that he makes the claim that biblical slavery is an invention of the atheist, and he gives the why, or at least his why, which is the atheist wanting to impugn God, the Christian God, in some way for whatever reason. Just because atheists got it out for his God. It doesn't matter. The atheist just wants to impugn God. So they invented this idea that there is God in these narratives in the Old Testament, specifically saying that people can own slaves. The thing is that he never goes into how they invented it, or how atheists invented biblical slavery, because the only way that you can actually come up with it, or the only thing that you can basically kind of think of when you're thinking about as he's going through everything, is that it seems to be that he keeps implying that the atheists are reading this and know what it actually means, but are somehow purposely twisting the narrative in order to create the narrative that God in these narratives is endorsing slavery. And he never really gets into how that happens, right? Because the concept is there. You've got ancient Near East, you got all sorts of examples of ancient Near East cultures having slaves. Slavery isn't new. It's not a unique concept. Obviously, the Bible talks about slavery because it talks about people being sold into slavery. But the idea that God would endorse slavery or tell his people that they could have slaves, and the Israelites, how dare we even say that? He's even said that if we even think of making the claim that Israelites even practice slavery, then that's racism. That's anti-Semitic language. Um, so basically, this is really kind of a nothing burger. It's him basically using. I think he uses his book, or portions of his book, to reiterate his points, how he's trying to argue that slavery isn't like he's basically saying slavery, the way that you read the Bible, which he does appeal to what Dan McClellan and other scholars talk about, which is univocality, reading the Bible as though it's one voice. All the narratives all kind of match up, link together. Um, no, it doesn't work. He tries, but it doesn't work very well. So what I'm going to do Oh, okay. I'm going to go ahead and invite people in and see if they want to join for this. And I'll get right into reading. So I can get into this if I want to go a little bit longer, this video again. But for right now that I've given a little context, because, like I said, I talked to Dr. Josh about this and he goes, I think it'd be funny if you read my review. And I was like, oh, can I do that? And he goes, yeah, do it up. Do it up. So he sent it to me. So I have that. So I will share screen and I have. Oh, where did it go? Oh, can I not share that on here? Hold on a second. I think I have a way of doing this. Yep, I can do it just like that. And I'm going to try not to butcher some of this. Some people say I read very well out loud. Some people say I don't. But there's some words in here I may fuck up the pronunciation, but I'll try my best. And feel free to correct me. And what I had to do is I couldn't share out the PDF, the Adobe Acrobat program, so I had to open the file, the PDF file in Chrome, and now y'all can see it. So I'll make sure that's doing everything that it's supposed to do. GeoSam, what monkey helped Praise write a book? That's a good question. Supposedly he did it all on his own. So review, The Ultimate Guide to Debunking Biblical Slavery. Author Praise I Am That I Am, self-published ebook. Introduction. One of the goals of Digital Hammurabi is to provide non-specialists with the tools to do their own research in a responsible way. It's always encouraging to see someone who is not formally trained working to better understand and formulate new ideas about a particular topic. Recently, an individual by the name Praise I Am That I Am published an ebook with the title The Ultimate Guide to Debunking Biblical Slavery. While there are substantial problems with the publication, it could be a first step toward a useful research paper, provided the author addresses the weaknesses in his arguments. And what Dr. Josh is referring to there with the publication is, like I was talking about, there's a formatting issue. That's probably a delivery. Crap. I hope that's not somebody that was expected. I get it, dog. Someone's here. Like, I didn't know that from the doorbell. 1 second, folks. Be right back. I thought it was a delivery I had to sign for, but nope, it was not. Somebody trying to sell solar in the winter. Okay. But yeah, so back to this, the publication issues were like I was talking about, the formatting of it, especially because it was released as a Kindle book, or I got the Kindle edition. I don't know if he released a paperback or not. I have to go back and look. Either way, the formatting of it was really shitty. So, summary of the ebook. The publication is laid out in 7 chapters, which deal with issues that the author considers critical to the discussion about slavery in the Bible. The final chapter deals with the New Testament, which lies outside of my field of expertise, so I'll leave that to another to review. The first chapter, entitled Slave or Servant, deals with the nuance and variability of the Hebrew word aved, which is generally translated slave or servant, as well as the law of the amah, maidservant, in Exodus 21, verses 7 through 11. Chapter 2 addresses on Exodus 21, verses 20 through 21, arguing several points, including the death penalty for a guilty master, the purpose of the day or two in 21:21, the overall purpose of the law itself and the possible scenarios that it could have addressed. Also included in this chapter is a brief analysis of the goring ox passage in Exodus 21, 28 through 32, though the specific point of the section was unclear. Chapter 3 moves to the oft-debated passage, Leviticus 25, 44 through 46, where the author appears to argue that these verses describe the process of manumission brought about through legal adoption. So Leviticus 25, 44 through 46 is that one that really hammers it home. As for your male and female slaves, you may purchase them from the nations around you. These you may keep as property in perpetuity. You may pass them on as inherited property to your sons and daughters, that kind of, or to your sons, yada yada yada. He describes the process of manumission brought about through legal adoption, a common practice in the ancient Near East. He also examines the use of the Hebrew word achuzah, landed property, arguing that because Yahweh referred to himself as Ahuzah in Ezekiel 44:28, this necessarily does away with any notion of chattel slavery in Leviticus 25:44 through 46. Chapter 4 moves to Deuteronomy 20:21, dealing with the taking of captive wives and assigning the inhabitants of foreign cities to corvée labor. That's the forced labor. The author identifies the connection between the suzerain vassal treaties and the book of Deuteronomy, which in his opinion would remove any forced aspect from the labor provided to the Israelites. He also discusses his interpretation of the transitional period described in Deuteronomy 21, 12 through 13, arguing that the captive woman is bewailing her former ill treatment in her native land, rather than mourning the loss of her family. Chapter 5 addresses the issues of the nature of the Pentateuchal laws, arguing, as nearly all A&E and Hebrew Bible scholars now do, that these law codes were not legislative and normative. Chapter 6 deals with miscellaneous texts, though at times one wonders, given the explanations provided, why some of these passages are brought into the discussion. Finally, Chapter 7 briefly addresses slavery in the New Testament. Selected critiques of the material. This review is not designed to address every issue with the research, conclusion, and presentation of this text. I would advise the author to seek out a scholar in the field who specializes in the legal text of the Hebrew Bible and in ancient Near East, who has the time and willingness to work with him on this publication. My goal will only be to select what I consider to be representative errors made by the author and to present alternative explanations when appropriate. Improper use of citations. One of the issues that becomes immediately clear as the reader makes his way through each chapter is the incredible over-reliance on extensive citations taken from a myriad of scholars, the arguments of whom the author often appears to not understand. In fact, a short sentence or paragraph is often followed by multiple paragraph-long citations, many of which have little to nothing to do with the previously made point. To be clear, it is absolutely essential that a specialist or non-specialist thoroughly research and cite their sources of information. However, it is just as critical to understand the overall and specific arguments of the scholars that you are citing. A particularly striking example of this can be seen in Chapter 3 under the heading Adoption Through Manumission. The author opens with his customary paragraph, "Adoption in the ancient Near East was a legal process in which an individual from a lower social class could receive manumission. The process of manumission usually lasted the entire master's life, which is considered perpetuity in Leviticus 25:46, or olam in Hebrew. The master not only provided housing, food, etc., but would bequeath their estate and belongings to the manumitted individual after their passing." Following this paragraph is a list of 11, sometimes several paragraph long citations, none of which argue for Leviticus 25:44 through 46 being the practice of manumission through adoption. So he has footnotes here, pages 177, FF of ebook, page 177. But several of these citations are incomplete, incorrectly cited, or simply incorrect. This is representative of the citations in the publication. A particularly concerning reference is seen in number 7. Slaves could also be manumitted. Manumission of foreign slaves could also be manumitted. Manumission of foreign slaves by adoption was common in ancient West Asia. See F.W. Knobloch, Adoption, ABD 177 through 78. I'm not sure what ABD stands for right offhand. And the examples discussed there, including an elephantine text, Kraling 8, that refers to the manumission and adoption of a young male bearing a Yahwistic name. On the formula of adoption, see S.M. Paul, Adoption Formula, a study of cuneiform and biblical legal clauses, MAA RAV2, 1979-1980, 173 to through 185. See Leviticus 25, 44 through 46, which speaks of slaves acquired both from the surrounding nations and from foreign long-term residents in the land and their descendants. This is one reference that seems to connect the manumission of foreign slaves by adoption and Leviticus 25, 44 through 46, although the connection seems odd. The oddity resolves itself, however, when one actually goes to the source of the quote. If one Googles slaves and manumission together, they will likely eventually come upon this reference by Saul Olean, the source of this quotation, and that's in figure 1, which is right there. Unfortunately for this author of this ebook, he has grossly misquoted his source. Indeed, what is found in the book is actually two distinct endnotes that have been quoted together as a single paragraph. Here's what is actually in the body of Olean's book, figure 2. The foreign male slave. Biblical narratives and legal texts speak from time to time of slaves of foreign origin. Unlike the Israelite enslaved because of debt, whose period of compulsory servitude was limited, enslaved aliens could be made to serve for a lifetime. Their progeny were also slaves. Both they and their children could be bequeathed as part of an inheritance from one generation to another. Surviving texts suggest that enslaved foreigners captured in war or purchased from a seller for money were a common, was probably a common thing. In the endnotes, we see figure 3 and modification of Van Gennep's rights to passage, model 127, see Exodus, blah, blah, blah. 128, slaves could be manumission of foreign slaves by adoption, yada, yada, yada. I don't think I need to go through all that. You guys can see it. It's again, him blending citations. Thus, the initial error of combining endnotes 128 and 129 into one quotation led to a citation that seemed to favor the author's interpretation, but was simply an erroneous quote that provided no connection between manumission through adoption and Leviticus 25, 44 through 46. Furthermore, when one views the individual endnotes as they were intended, they argue that Leviticus 25, 44 through 46 is in fact about the lifelong enslavement of foreigners, along with the master's legal right to pass them and their children on as an inheritance to the following generations. One wonders if the author of the ebook did more than simply Google these words. Had he looked up one of the references cited in his own quotation, Knobloch in the ABD, he would have seen that endnote 128, which might have seemed to favor his argument, provides no support at all, but in fact may work against him. Knobloch does in fact mention that manumission of slaves by adoption was practiced in the ANE and is likely mentioned in the Hebrew Bible. He cites Genesis 15, 2 through 3, Abram and his slave as an implied future heir, and possibly 1 Chronicles, 1 Chronicles 2, 34 through 35, with Jara, but not Leviticus 25, 44 through 46. In fact, Knobloch writes, although adoption was practiced in ancient Israel, it is impossible to say to what extent this was true. Many of the biblical cases occur in the patriarchal narratives or on foreign soil, involve foreigners, or are uncertain. Moreover, adoption is not mentioned in biblical law, emphasis mine. In other words, what little evidence we have of adoption in the Hebrew Bible, it is not mentioned in biblical law, and Leviticus 25:46 is not mentioned. Another example of improper citation practices can be seen in chapter 2, where the author writes, in any case, a few days is required to deliberate if there's actual evidence that Ebed was beaten, or rather if the story was concocted, due to the apparent loophole in verses 26, 27, because the Ebed had motive to get out of their contract. It appears that the author is arguing that the phrase, if he survives a day or two, in Exodus 21:21, is to be understood as the time necessary for the investigating authorities to determine if the slave was actually beaten by the master, or if the slave had fabricated the assault to get out of his contract. In support of this position, he quotes Walter Kaiser. The aim of this law was not to place the slave at the mercy of the master, but to restrict the master's power over his slaves. Simply put, proof was needed only to a master's malice or of his murderous intent. In cases where the slave lied a day or two after the chastisement, the benefit of the doubt was given to the master only because proof became more difficult. But if the slave died immediately, no more proof was needed, and presumably laws such as Exodus 21:12 would be operative. Exodus 21:21 is thus setting a kind of statute of limitations to offer guidance on how to apply 21:20. The law is thus not given to facilitate, but rather to mitigate abuse. In other words, Kaiser has adopted a rather common interpretation of the passage. If a master beats a slave, the law speaks of two possible outcomes. First, if the slave dies immediately, the master is punished, perhaps killed, though this is debated. If the slave survives for a day or two, then the master is not punished. The interpretation Kaiser has adopted is that the day or two that the slave survived would provide what might be considered reasonable doubt with respect to the murderous intent of the master, indicating rather that the cause of death was more likely the result of the chastisement. Thus, the master would not be held liable for the death. However, if the slave died immediately, excuse me, my voice cracked, this would likely indicate that the master had malicious intent in the beating and would thus be punished. In other words, the proof of guilt would be the immediate death of the slave. Kaiser's interpretation does not seem to support the author's position. Although there are several instances of this type of citation, one more example will suffice. It can be seen in the section on Deuteronomy 20:21. The author writes, "These suzerain/vassal treaties show everyone in the ancient Near East agreed upon certain conditions of labor/servitude, hence eliminating the idea of any forced subjugation or unfair treatment." This next quote by A&E scholar Raymond Westbrook epitomized that. Not only is this an incredibly bold assertion, everyone in the ancient Near East agreed upon certain conditions of labor/servitude, for which the author provides no support, the quote by Westbrook seems to say nothing concerning this issue. I will quote it here in full as it is quoted so in the ebook. Freedom in the ancient Near East was a relative, not an absolute state, as the ambiguity of the term for slave in all the region's languages illustrates. Slave could be used to refer to a subordinate in the social ladder. Thus, the subjects of a king were called his slaves, even though they were free citizens. The king himself, if a vassal, was the slave of his emperor. Kings, emperors, and commoners alike were slaves of the gods. Even a social inferior, when addressing a social superior, referred to himself out of the politeness as your slave. There were, moreover, a plethora of servile conditions that were not regarded as slavery, such as son, daughter, wife, serf, or human pledge. One might assume that the phrase "in all the region's languages" in Westbrook's quotation was taken by the author to mean that everyone in the ancient Near East agreed upon certain conditions of labor/servitude, though this could only be confirmed by the author himself. In addition to this quotation having little to nothing to do with the aforementioned assertion, it is interesting to note what Westbrook says concerning slavery on the very same page from which this quote was taken. Slaves could be purchased, inherited, hired, and pledged like any other property. Slaves being owned could not own property themselves. On the next page, we see at first sight the situation of a free person given in pledge to a creditor was identical to slavery. The pledge lost his personal freedom and was required to serve the creditor, who exploited the pledge's labor. Of course, neither of these quotes deal with suzerain vassal treaties, as the quote cited by the author, but it is interesting how Westbrook is quoted to ostensibly show that the general use of slave in a variety of contexts of the ancient Near East, but the specific nature of slavery as described in the very next section is apparently not factored in. Everyone with it so far? Praise didn't do his research. Shocker. Yep. Sorry, I did put in some gum just because my mouth, I could chew on it a little bit so my mouth wouldn't get too tacky. Straw man arguments. Perhaps one of the more frustrating aspects of the publication is the constant use of what are known as straw man arguments, establishing a position that one's opponent does not take and then easily knocking it down. It will be useful to simply identify a few examples of such arguments that are rarely, if ever, made by consensus scholarship. In chapter 1, the author writes, "There is nothing inherently foul about being a servant. The argument is certainly not that the term Eved carries a derogatory or foul connotation, or that everyone who is labeled as such is proper slave. In chapter 2, he writes, the most obvious misconception is the rod, shevet, used in Exodus 21:20, is somehow indicative of chattel slavery. There is no argument that I can think of that connects the use of the rod in Exodus 21:20 with the identification of the slave in that verse as a chattel slave. As a final example, in chapter 3, the author writes, prolific Hebrew scholar Jacob Milgram conveys the idea that just because someone may be referred to as akuzah, property, doesn't mean that they were to be treated as such. The implication is that such a position is taken by the author's opposition, which of course, not the case. The argument is that they are considered property, which can be handed down as inheritance and kept in perpetuity, not that they can be treated in any way the master likes or how someone deprived of rights, or somehow deprived of rights. Yeah, that's one of the things that Bray's got into in his video, which was a little odd to see him do. Because for some reason, I've made the argument myself where when I was having a conversation, I think it was with Praise or it was with some other, wannabe Christian evangelical apologist on YouTube, where they were like, yeah, you could just beat you have them as property. I'm like, no, you don't understand. When I own property, I treat my property very well, but my property doesn't have any rights. So if I were to have slaves, I would probably take very good care of them if I wanted them to perform their jobs very well, right? Like my cat and my dog are under law my property. I don't abuse them. In fact, I probably spoil them rotten. So I give them good health care. I actually have health insurance on both of my pets. So their property, this doesn't necessarily mean that by being property, they are going to be subject to abuse. What's being talked about is the idea of fellow human beings, any person having rights of ownership over another person. That's the thing that has to be conveyed in the conversation when we're talking about slavery. And in these verses in the Bible, the narrative, the context of it is very clear. The concept of property is being applied to other human beings. Whether or not they're being mistreated or can just be blatantly mistreated or just flat out killed, no. Obviously, there seems to be verses like in Exodus 20 or Exodus 21 where you couldn't just a master couldn't just outright kill their slaves. But could they beat them? It seems that way, yeah. And that's if you had a slave that just didn't like the condition in which they were in. That here they are, an unpaid worker, subject to this master's whim, and they've got to do they've got to do some possibly harsh labor. If they don't want to do it, rod of correction kind of thing. But if you had compliant slaves, really didn't have to worry about it. But again, that was for foreign slaves, that wasn't for Hebrew slaves or Israelite slaves. Linguistic errors. I would also like to briefly examine a linguistic argument made by the author in chapter 4. Arguing against the idea of rape being implied in Deuteronomy 21:11-14, he writes, moreover, this word take in the Septuagint is the Greek word lambano, and it's in the subjunctive mood denoting consent because the apodosis and protasis classify subjunctives as a third-class condition sentence, making this union conditional. Since it's conditional and in the mood of hope, it is in agreement or simply a betrothal. Without going into any great detail, there is a fundamental misunderstanding of the subjunctive mood in this analysis. There are different types of verbs that can be used in Greek, as in other languages. Some verbs are in the indicative mood, which means that they are describing things that are real or actual. If I were to say, I am going to the store to buy some ice cream, the verbal phrase am going would be in the indicative mood, since it's describing something that is actually happening. In Greek, the form of the verb lambano means I receive and is in the indicative mood as it is describing something actual. The subjunctive mood, however, is used when describing something that is not actual, but contingent. If I were to say, if I were going to the store, I would buy some ice cream. The verbal phrase "we're going" would be the subjunctive mood. I'm not saying that I am going to the store. I am saying if I were going to the store. The word if is driving the change in the verb from I am going to if I were going. It is a conditional statement. While this might seem a bit confusing, it is essential to understand the use of the verbs in Deuteronomy 21:11. Verse 10 begins with the word Ian or een, if, which sets up a conditional sentence. If you go out to battle, if you see, subjunctive, among the captives a beautiful woman, and if you consider, subjunctive, her, and if you take, subjunctive, her, for yourself as a wife, notice that each of the verbs in this verse 11 are in the subjunctive mood. They are all contingent upon if in verse 10. This is the standard form for if-then style clauses in the Greek and in other languages. In short, the conditional aspect of the verse has nothing to do with whether the woman is consenting to the action. The verbal form is in the subjunctive because that is the mood that the verbs take when governed by the word if, just like in English. This is simply an error made by someone who does not know the language in question. Conclusion. Again, this is no way intended to be a thorough review of the author's work or even to point out what is the most significant errors in the publication, including complete lack of editing and appropriate source citations. It is simply designed to highlight several examples of erroneous methods and conclusions that I consider to be easy to identify and grasp. It is my sincere hope that the author, should he wish to develop this publication into a useful tool for the non-specialist, will seek out a professional in the field who would be willing to work with him to improve this publication and to provide feedback on both his methodologies and the resulting conclusions. Joshua Bowen. Because he's using Scott Duke from the Septuagint. That's why the Greek is there. Get shit on praise? What is that about? So apparently nobody wants to join. Damn. Does anybody want to come in? Anyone? Nobody's. Is it dinner? It's dinner time where everybody else is at except me. I see Halsey's here. Hillary's emails. So yeah, so I got to read that, and luckily I knocked that out at the beginning. I told you it wasn't very long. It would be neat to go through that book with Dr. Josh, but him and Kip Davis have been doing. They've done a couple long, some pretty lengthy content with rationality rules. When I post those links, do those links actually work when I post them through StreamYard, or do I need to post those directly onto the live chat through YouTube? I should check that out. Oh yeah, that link works. Okay. Looks like the link came through all right. Cool. So yeah, I will attempt to go through some of this video a little bit more. Since the last time I did it, it wasn't so good. And who knows, maybe Dr. Josh will see the fact that he was tagged in it and go from there. Oh, I got Red Fang here. Red Fang and oh, I got Red Fang here. Somebody's got the stream on.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
or evening.
Hey, Red Fang, how much did the election cost you? Out of curiosity, didn't you guys have bets?
Yeah, $20.
Huh?
$20.
You broke up. $50?
20.
Oh, $20. Oh, okay.
Oh, believe me, the election's going to cost you a lot more than that. A lot more.
Yeah, that's why. That's like I was when I was on Answers and Atheists. I told them I was like, yeah, according to the economists, they were saying, oh, if these tariffs go through, price of shit's gonna go up. And I was like, yeah. Told my wife, I'm like, it might be time to buy that bigger TV that we've been thinking about getting now. So
yeah, anything that could possibly just be within your reach now, get it, because who knows what's going to happen next year or the year after that, or even if they somehow reverse it in 4 years, the consequences are going to go way past a decade.
yeah, and like I said, even if it doesn't, I mean, cool. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But
Yeah.
I was like, well, let's. Since my wife and I had the money, I was like, okay, there's some upgrades I want to do, so let's do those now. And I know some people. My wife was actually telling me some people are actually that she works with are buying new cars, just because they're concerned about the cost of vehicles, going up. So, and any of you Harley, if it really does go up that bad, you might want to, if you like Harley motorcycles, I think most of the parts for Harleys come out of Canada and Mexico, so you might want to buy those before they go up. Let me see here.
Well, that's a great idea for a protest that would be on all the headlines, is to have all the Harley bike groups just ride through Washington or whatever.
That would be funny.
That would be such an well, for whatever the cause, do one or two of those, you're going to get some coverage.
Yeah, somebody said professional streamers pinned the link, so that sounds like a chastisement from Spooky. So I will go ahead and pin the link. So it is pinned, Spooky. It is pinned. But yeah, this video that Praise had done, and that got me to the point where I was having the conversation with Dr. Josh, and and he's like, oh yeah, go ahead and read my review of his book. This thing was absolutely, I mean, this is 2 hours of awful. I mean, this was just how he like twists and contorts the stuff that he's reading to try to, and then he goes, oh, well, the atheists made this up. The atheists are the ones that invented biblical slavery. And it's like,
what?
You're the one that's jumping through hoops to make it not look like that. If you do just a straightforward reading of, it can be the NIV, the ESV, the New King James, a lot of those translations, right? It's right there. It's talking about, oh, they're not using slavery in the same way you think they are. And I'm like, okay.
The apologists, I've noticed, have been trying to distance themselves from the use of the word slavery. Of course they'll call it indentured servitude. That was kind of it for a while. But I noticed on a live, well, just a stream, not a live stream, on Apologia Live's channel. It's, he has Apologia, and then there's Apologia Live. He had, it's one of those two channels anyway. He had Kip and Josh on there, and they were talking about this discussion between Sean McDowell and some other Old Testament professor from Biola University, which is,
I think I saw parts of that. Yeah,
which
that
I
one
call Apologetics U. And she at some point said, I'm going to stop using the word slave and just use the Hebrew word ebed. Ebed. We're not going to use slave because it's not the same thing. You assume too many Western, 19th century things when you use the word slave. So we'll just use ebed. So, once again, they try to, separate themselves from the strength of the word slave by coming up with something a little bit softer, pretending that biblical slavery was softer,
Yeah. So here's I hope I don't get well, he should be fine. He only streams on like 8 fucking venues. I don't think he'll have a problem with it. This one right here. Hold on a second. Damn it. There we go. Instead of doing his, I want to do, because I mentioned this guy. This is I've been watching this guy's videos. This is Deconstruction Zone.
Oh, cool.
And this isn't a very long one, but this is an example of how the conversation on slavery can get very almost adversarial.
Oh yeah, yeah.
very very quickly. I know there's Maynard Saves. He sometimes shows up on my channel. I saw him over in one of the live chats. A few other people. Iron Charioteer was over there. I was like, oh, so that's where everybody went that used to hang out on my channel. Just kidding. But this was a funny conversation. I'm probably more charitable. I think this guy's name is Justin. I'm probably a little bit more charitable.
The host, yeah, Justin.
Yep. I'm probably a little bit more charitable when it comes to this, but his way of just basically using scripture as almost like ammunition is incredible.
Yeah.
In my opinion, it's like, damn, this guy's got like I'm wondering if he's got like a crib sheet for this stuff.
Well, I'm sure the ammo he can use is so common that there's a pattern that he has just a list on hand or bookmarks on hand, to go to those scriptures that,
Yeah.
that he said.
Well, I mean, but some of these he was doing, like, you could actually hear him looking it up, and he's like, yeah, see this one right here? And it's like, damn, dude. And you see these guys come in there and they talk like, oh yeah, this, really like your, kind of enjoy, just kind of want to talk to you, have a good conversation, see where this goes. And within like 5 minutes, once he starts putting their feet to the fire, things don't go so well for them. And it's really kind of funny.
Sure, I appreciate you inviting me. I'm a Christian. I'm not here to prove you wrong. I just want you to prove me wrong.
All right, what do you need proven wrong?
Well, I'm just wondering what your texts say, whatever proof you have against it.
I don't have it.
And like I say, I'm not here to prove you wrong, not here to talk shit or anything. I'm just wondering what you have for evidence to prove Christianity wrong.
Oh, we could just read the book and see that the book is full of lies.
Okay. Well, present it. I'm listening.
All right, we'll start there. Since we've got a PhD physiologist in the house, we'll do Deuteronomy 22.
Is anybody else familiar with this guy's content in the live stream? Or am I just like...
No, I haven't heard of him.
You talking about Deconstruction Zone?
Yeah, I know you've heard of him, but...
Oh yeah, I've been watching him ever since he came up in my feed as a suggestion. And I've been watching hours of his stuff. It's just really fun. It's almost as fun or right on par with watching Planet Peterson do his stuff.
Yeah. Fucking A, Spooky. I think I pinned that fucking link and he goes, congratulations, Jay. You fucking prick, Spooky. He did it. He pinned a comment. Or he pinned a link.
And we're going to have an interesting
So
lesson.
let's start. Well, go ahead. That's fine. I'm listening.
We're going to have a lesson about physiology.
Yay!
So I'm sorry. I wanted starting in verse 13. Can you see the screen?
Yes, I can.
All right. So suppose a man marries a woman, but after going into her, dislikes her and makes up charges against her, slandering her by saying, I married this woman, but when I lay with her, I did not find evidence of her virginity. The father of the young woman and her mother shall then submit the evidence of the young woman's virginity to the elders of the city at the gate. The father of the young woman shall say to the elders, I gave my daughter in marriage to this man, but he dislikes her. And now he has made up charges against her, saying, I did not find evidence of your daughter's virginity, but here is the evidence of my daughter's virginity. Then the elders of the town shall spread out the cloth before, then they shall spread out the cloth before the elders of the town, and the elders of the town shall take the man and punish him. So he gets punished if he lies about her being a virgin, bleeding on the sheet. If, however, the charge is true, that evidence of the young woman's virginity was not found, then they shall bring the young woman out to the entrance of her father's house, and the men of her town shall stone her until she is unalive, because she committed a disgraceful act in Israel by prostituting herself in her father's house. So there's two problems here.
That section is hilarious. It's like, oh, no blood on the sheet. So what we automatically infer is, what this automatically entails is that she was fucking other guys while living in her family's house.
Yeah.
I want to discuss the second problem. The second problem, Sarah knows pretty well, which is that the bloody sheet can't be good evidence. Sarah, can you explain to the guests why the bloody sheet's not good evidence of virginity?
Sure thing. So it is not universal that the first time a woman, I don't know what I'm allowed to say on here, does the deed.
I can agree with that. She could have been on her period.
Well,
Stupid, useless comment by caller.
That's absolutely, yeah, she could have been on her period.
That's not what she said.
so if you are a virgin, the first time you do,
It would be better if she was on her period, because
Yeah.
because if what's coming next is not good.
do the deed, sometimes there's blood and sometimes there's not. And it's about 50-50 which way it's going to go.
Okay.
So the issue is that this law is written assuming that every single virgin bleeds the first time so that you can use that as evidence of her virginity. But it's a terrible test because it's no better than flipping a coin.
And I can agree with that, folks. Being a Christian, I'm not a perfect Christian. I've taken quite a few ladies' virginity, and to be honest, whether it's I mean, y'all can laugh all you want.
No, we're laughing
I mean,
with you. I promise. We're not laughing at you.
No, I mean, let's be real.
Big W
very
for
few women
laying the pipe.
bleed.
Oh, Justin.
And I'm not here to have
One, which is that the
Okay.
evidence of her being guilty is not good evidence.
Okay, so since this is on slavery, I'm going to skip and find the part where they start talking about slavery.
Take a breath. There is a law flying through the screen, and
well,
you know
that's
what?
fine. Yeah, and I like I said
Tomorrow,
from
when the YouTube
get-go,
video posts, there's gonna be a lot of ones in the comment of the YouTube
and,
video.
and like I said, that Christians today, he created. I think he understands it.
Well, he clearly
But here's
doesn't.
the thing. Here's the
Okay, they're still on the woman's.
It doesn't matter.
virginity.
She's still dead.
come on now, like.
The cornerstone, I promise. But I meant YouTube. Facebook is streaming, but they're not gonna. Yeah, I figured as much.
Almighty, I'm 34. My birthday was yesterday. Laws and stuff from the Old Testament have been pushed into the day. And as a Christian, I believe that when Christ came, he became the sacrifice so that we don't have to follow all the tedious rules, 600 and some odd rules of yesteryear.
Did Jesus
So
say
no
that?
10 commandments then, right?
What now?
No 10 commandments?
Yes, they still stand.
Why is that?
Why those?
Why is no? But we're going past the 10 Commandments. We're talking about the 600 and some odd rules.
Are they all laws of Moses?
613. 613 that includes the 10.
Yeah.
I think that's how that goes. I'm still.
That's
he's-
before Moses.
He's trying to place the Ten Commandments outside of the. of
Yeah.
the
Yeah,
law.
They love doing that.
What's that?
They love taking the Ten Commandments out of those laws. But you know, the Ten Commandments are different.
Red Fang, you were roboting like a motherfucker, dude. Yeah, I hope he comes back.
Me too.
I hope it fixes it. I like talking to Red Fang, but holy shit, that fucking roboting. Wow.
Yeah,
I
I
could-
didn't really understand what he was saying.
Yeah, he was basically talking about the apologetic where they try to like make the 10 commandments into something special, right?
Yeah.
Because these are like what praise does that, since we were talking about praise earlier, he goes along with it. He tries to do this. Well, the only real things that matter are these apodictic laws, these 10. Those casuistic shit. Nah, there's no other apodictic laws in the 600 out of the 603. Like it's really kind of hilarious because you shall not suffer a witch to live is an apodictic law, law. And yet
Yeah,
he
so-
only goes, he's like, oh no, there's only these 10. I'm like, no, there's others there. There's
Yes,
other
desperate
apodictic.
attempt to special plead.
Yeah, well, I agree with, like, when you watch like videos from Dan McClellan, I agree with him that a lot of this is like defending dogma. It's
Right.
it's renegotiating the text in order to defend dogma. It's not about looking at the data and then trying to, like, realizing, hey, some of these narratives don't add up. Well, they're trying very desperately to make all the narratives, speak as one voice because, well, a lot of people, I was taught that when I was a Christian, was that, you go to church and they talk about, yeah, this is like one big happy story kind of thing. And eventually it all makes sense in the end kind of thing. It's like
If you get enough of that Jesus.
Yeah. It's this shit that the Jews were going through and with their laws and trying to be righteous within the confines of the law, like what Paul talks about. Well, that was just God. That was the petri dish kind of thing. But what he realized is that, yeah, you really can't find righteousness that way, and you need a divine prophet or his son or he himself in some kind of physical form to die a wrongful death as a pure blood sacrifice in order to really seal the deal of your righteousness between your worthless ass and God.
But their laws given to Moses, aren't they?
They were before Moses.
No,
I'm not talking
the
about
Ten Commandments were not before Moses. They were written.
I'm not talking about the Ten Commandments.
You said the Ten Commandments. You literally said
that.
Yeah,
I believe in those, sure.
Nate,
I'm talking about
are you well?
Before Moses, the Pentateuch.
Is Dr. Joe in the house? Because I think this guest might need some therapy. Listen, the Ten Commandments were quite literally given to Moses according to the book. It literally happened.
Sure, and I believe in those. I've never
when
doubted.
He was on the mountain for 40 days. Okay, so
I'm not talking about.
I'm very curious how Justin, what quality there is about him that lets him say these infuriating things to people without them just going off. Because he'll say a lot of things about them, about how they're lying or how they need a doctor, and they don't go berserk on that. But when they're pressed on scripture, they go berserk.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, and the interesting thing here is it's like the guy forgets that it's like he forgot that there's this part in, I think it's in Exodus, and it's literally setting the stage of, like, God tells Moses, yeah, this is about the law, folks, and God says, yeah, go ahead and Moses, tell all the people of Israel to assemble, and like there's gonna be, and like in the narrative it kind of goes on, and like darkness kind of forms around the mountain and it starts to get kind of heavy, things are getting serious and shit, and the Israelites basically go to Moses, they go, you know what, that's scary as shit, we don't want to deal with that thing one on one, you talk to him, and then whatever he has to say to us, just convey it, he can tell it to you, and then you can basically you be the middleman kind of thing. And that's literally what's told in that narrative in Exodus. I think it's reiterated even in Deuteronomy. It's fucking hilarious. They're like, no, we don't want to see you. We don't want to hear you. You're scary. Ooh, just talk to Moses. Whatever you want to do, we'll just hear it from him. So Moses is like, all right, well, this is what God tells us to do. Here it is.
About those.
The Ten Commandments.
I'm talking about prior to Moses.
Like what? Name one.
Okay, just a moment.
He has no idea what he's talking about. I assume he's going to try to mention the Noahide laws.
I think he's just going to say the other laws because he's not sure that they came before. I mean, he thinks they came before the Ten Commandments, even though they didn't.
Yeah, that's possible. Joyce C says we all need therapy. I agree.
Yeah, in the narrative, it's all basically one thing being kind of.
After listening to some of these guests, I need some therapy. Holy smokes. I'll tell you what. This is ridiculous. Guys, thank you so much for being here.
Person that when somebody actually argues you don't want to listen to them. And that's fun. You don't have to.
You haven't. I'm asking you to present the evidence of your argument.
Yeah, and that's the funny thing. The guy thinks he's actually made an argument. He's made claims. This entire stream, I never heard the guy make a fucking argument at all.
Yeah.
Not one.
Yeah. That happens a lot.
Which argument?
You were saying that there were laws prior to Moses. Initially, you said they were the Ten Commandments.
Well, anyways, what I was saying originally
Initially, you said that they were the Ten Commandments, and now you're pivoting. So what are they?
No, you guys are the one that mentioned the Ten Commandments
No,
first.
you were.
It wasn't me.
All right, so everyone listening to this, put a 666 in the comments, both on the YouTube video that's going to be posted.
Now, to be fair, to start the conversation, he did not mention the 10 Commandments. He just mentioned that we didn't have to obey any laws anymore because of Jesus. And then the female on there, she said not even the 10 Commandments. So, but he's like, oh no, those still apply. So it's like, wait,
Yeah.
how did those still apply? But he did mention the laws.
Who says, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Later, and on this one, if you heard Nate say that he believed,
I wouldn't even bother doing this. I would just simply say, what are you? Because all I would just basically reiterate from my understanding of the narrative, all of these laws were kind of given out around the same particular period of time. They were all basically told to Moses from God to convey to the people of Israel.
Yeah.
Even the 10 Commandments that were given before Moses.
And then ask him, do you disagree with that? Because that seems to be the issue, is that and now make your case why there's 613 total. Why is it 603 don't count anymore and only the 10 remain?
Right.
What is this?
I didn't say that.
I'm sure you didn't.
They can, but rewind the film.
I can't.
Anyways,
We're live.
what
There's no
I'm saying
rewinding
is-
the film.
What I'm saying is provide proof
Of what?
if you really can against Christianity. And that's what the point is.
I can. Want me to start with Jesus?
Be glad to.
All right, we're going to go to Matthew chapter 10, verse 23. And then we're going to go
Okay, let me pull it up
to-
as well.
Matthew
Hold
16.
on.
All right.
I don't ever understand the logic of
Oh, Jesus came so we didn't have to follow.
twins. What a strange sacrifice.
17 through 19, since I assume Gus
Okay.
hasn't read that yet. And I'll put
Here
it
we
on the
go.
screen. Scripts, the law, or the prophets. I have come not to abolish, but kingdom of heaven. To Jesus.
Expect that, so we didn't eat shellfish, we didn't eat pork, and all these other things.
That part's funny.
Old,
but
was it? Let me see the rest of this name. I hear it. Crank. God said to follow the laws forever. The God of the Bible said to follow the laws forever. And Jesus said to follow all. The Old Testament
It
clearly
never
says,
said you should either.
It says
And you can mute me just like every other person does when I
Do you think maybe you're the reason why you get muted?
keep muting me wrong. You know I'm right.
Oh, honey.
If you would stop talking long enough, I can show you why you're
No,
wrong.
you know I'm right. That's why you keep muting me.
No, you're wrong. I keep muting because you don't shut up. I can mute
Where
you
do
all day
think
long. It's
That,
not
that
hard.
caller's
Oh.
from?
he sounds like he's Virginia.
Yeah, it's got a very distinctive,
It's a
kind of
twang.
annoying voice.
Yeah, it sounds like a Virginia twang. West
Yeah.
Virginia.
Okay.
So I'm going to show you where God says
And that's only based on the fact that I served in the military with people from West Virginia, so I could be wrong.
Yeah.
to make slaves.
I
Exodus.
said, okay, that's not the New Testament.
I don't care what testament it is. Your God
Okay,
said to
heard
do it. Says when you buy a Hebrew male
Yes.
slave,
For
he
some
shall
reason,
go.
he's
I'm sorry, he
trying
shall
to
serve
pivot
for
over
6.
to the.
What's that? Nope. Did I lose you? Scott, are you
I
there?
think I'm having trouble with my connection. I was saying,
Oh, there
yeah,
you go.
the caller keeps trying to pivot back over to the New Testament.
Yeah, and he had another guy do the same thing. There was a 38-minute video that I saw. It was college Bible or Bible college student gets owned by atheist, I think is the title.
Yeah.
Bon says, Jay, can you send me the video where praise threatens you? Yeah, I can send you that link sometime. I've got it somewhere. Yeah, I still kept that. Had
And
to.
every
I had to. It's like a trophy. My first death threat.
civilization did that.
I don't care. Says, but in the 7th year he shall go out a free
You don't accept
person
reality.
without debt. If he comes,
Yeah, this is funny because this guy basically is trying to make a case like, oh well, there's at stage. There's this guy. He's like trying to say, he's trying to make this kind
Hey,
of
sorry,
separate.
my
Like,
StreamYard is disconnected.
yeah, who knows? He's trying to make this like, oh well, that doesn't mean that they actually did it. You know, does it mean that they actually did it in real life? Yeah, that's a whole other topic. But the problem is that if you're a believer in this particular God, you believe this God to exist. Do you believe that this is true? Do you believe that God actually existed and that God was actually doing these kind of was actually telling Moses to tell the people of Israel to do this shit and blah 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 blah? Well, yeah, of course. That's what we're talking about. That's
Yeah.
what we're talking about. Whether or not, obviously, there's narratives there where it talks about God telling Moses to tell the people to do something, and the people of Israel don't do it, or they start bitching and griping about it, and God's like, "All right, time for a plague," or some stupid shit like that. But hey, it is what it is. However, I love the fact that the guy wants to try to basically do this idea. Well, let's be realistic here. Do you believe God to exist? Do you believe these words are true? And that's all you have to ask. And if you go, well, yeah, then it should follow, based on you believing this God to actually exist, and this is all true story, that these are actual prescriptives that God handed down through Moses to the people of Israel. Originally, he wanted to hand them down, to everybody. He wanted to just tell everybody to their face, hey, yeah, this is what you can and can't do, and this is what's okay to do, and all that shit. Nope, they were too chicken shit to do that. So Moses is the fucking messenger.
Amen.
Comes in single, he shall go out.
Hey, Captain Desk.
Hey guys, how you doing?
Good to see you again, Dave.
Having fun with biblical slavery.
That's what I gathered.
Not single.
Listen, I know.
Go ahead.
What better activity is there on a Friday evening than to
Exactly.
I was just recording a couple songs for Zach. He's putting together a holiday thing. So my voice is a little wore out from all the high notes I was hitting. But I got a couple recorded, so send them off to him. So he should be good to go there.
If married, then his wife shall go out with him. If his master gives him a wife and she bears him sons or daughters,
I know this is in Exodus.
And bears some sons or daughters, the wife and her children shall be her
And it
masters.
says you can kill them, you can do what?
And he shall go out alone. But
does it say you can kill him, or what? What the fuck is it saying now? It's saying what it's saying. What it's saying is to do a Matt Dillahunty.
Yeah.
If his slave declares, so on and so forth. So, according to the text, God is telling you, if a male Hebrew comes into your service and you give him a slave as a wife, he goes out without his wife when he's done. The wife and the children that belong to her will be permanent slaves of the owner. God is telling them that they will be permanent slaves of the owners. And this is actually in contradiction to the ancient cultures. If you read the law codes from the other ancient Near Eastern cultures.
Tell me an ancient culture that did.
I'm trying to tell you, if you read
No, quit fucking music.
If you read the law codes of the
I'm going to get back to my chicken feet and my hog.
The other ancient Near Eastern culture.
He sounds like a Dave Chappelle character.
Cultures, they literally say that you can leave with your wife, and if you stop talking, I would get to it. Right. No, they're law number like 3 or 4 in the Eshnuna law codes. I can bring it up for you.
You know I'm right.
You're wrong. I'll just bring it up for you.
Name one culture in the past that didn't have slavery at that time period.
I never said that there were cultures back then that didn't have slaves. I'm saying that your God allowed
one. Now he's completely missing the fucking point. It's not whether or not they realistically did or not. It's the fucking prescriptives that it's what you would hold to being prescriptives from God. You're the one that believes this shit. Do you think that God was just talking out his ass? I'm telling Moses to tell you all to not do this and to basically do this, and you're allowed to do this. And if you don't, well, realistically,
yeah,
they're not going to do what I tell them.
Whenever somebody like Justin or even like Planet Peterson or anybody on the line or Atheist Experience, whenever they start asking specific questions like that, all the squirming that goes on, because they can see Justin's point coming along. Well, whatever you think actually happened, whatever you think the New Testament is all about, this God, commanded people and told them how to treat their slaves and what to do with them and how to impose slavery. And that's the God you worship, whether or not
there's
been doing it in the New Testament. That is your God.
Yeah, there's a historical critique as to whether or not this was something that actually happened, whether or not, even if it's the case that groups of people wrote this stuff down as though, let's say it wasn't an actual God, but they were saying it was from an actual God and then conveying it to this culture and the people were following it prescriptively, right? That's when you get into the historical aspect of the writings, whether or not the society or this particular culture actually implemented these as real rules or whatever. But when it comes to a theological discussion or the religious implications of it, where it comes, you are a believer in this, you believe that this God exists, like I said before, then it becomes something that you have to try. That's that circle that you have to square. You have to reconcile that with your belief that this God is real, and you hold to this God being a particular way, and you think that everything about the Bible, for the most part, is 100% true, and that these were real things, that this God was really saying this. These were his real, even if the people didn't do it, this is what he really wanted, and this is what he really commanded of people, and this is what he actually allowed people to do. That's the conversation that's taking place here, and this guy is trying to pivot to a historical critique, and that's the problem. It's not a historical critique; it's an internal critique of the religion itself. As Christians, a lot of times they'll say, "I believe that God to exist, and all of the Bible is true."
Yep. So do you get to have conversations like this in meat space?
Where?
Meat space, real life in 3D.
I've had these conversations in real life. Yeah, they go horrible.
Yeah, I avoid them because everybody here in Texas has a gun.
Yeah. I mean, I had them in the past. I mean, I remember being, as a Christian, the way I was raised and taught in the Bible, my family did not agree with the idea of tithing, right? That churches were not supposed to be imposing or saying that tithing was or even teaching that tithing was something that people who go to church should do in order to be, considered a true believer. Tithing was very much a legislative thing according to the scripture. It was their form of taxation, that sort of thing. And then other people will be like, no, it's not. You got to give 10% of your cash, before the state and the government take it.
Yeah.
And then you come to find out they were even getting it wrong, because according to the Bible, you didn't give 10% of your fucking cash. You gave 10% of the goods that you produced. If you couldn't give 10% of your goods and you had to do it, you had to use money in because you couldn't get your cattle or your grains or whatever to where they needed to go, you could pay in gold, but it was an extra 5%. So it wasn't a 10% monetary tithe. It was a 15% monetary tithe.
Yeah, as I was going to say, that's how I remember reading it, is you had to give 10% of your crops, not money.
Yeah, but there was a substitute in there.
Okay.
There is in the Old Testament, it gives a provision for people who could not get their 10% of their crop or their cattle or wherever to where it needed to go, that they could do so monetarily. But if they were to do it in money, there was an additional 5% added, so it was 15% for gold.
They'd rather have the goats than the money.
Yeah, well, because that money was to go to the tribe of Levi, and since the tribe of Levi was their scholars and all that, they didn't produce their own goods. So that those grains and stuff like that were to go to the tribe of Levi, so that they had those provisions in order to survive. The
Gotcha.
other groups, they were perfectly fine on their own. It was basically a way of supporting their government class, their educational and legislative class.
Allowed it.
Humans
The
allowed it.
difference here,
Your
Nate,
God
like,
allowed it.
You folks are just like, it's hilarious. Like, you don't understand humanity.
Did your God
Nate.
say to make slaves? Yes or no?
Show me a verse that says
Did your
No, he didn't. Now I have to disagree with Justin. He didn't say specifically, at least in that context, to make a person his slave. It isn't a prescriptive in that sense. It's they can have slaves. It's being allowed. It's not an ought.
Did your God
No. Say
did your God tell them that they can make slaves? Yes or no?
there's a
That's better. They can make slaves.
reason you keep muting me.
Because you're obnoxious. I need a yes or a no. Did your God tell them that they can have slaves?
You know I'm right.
I'm asking you to answer a yes or no question.
I'm done with y'all. Y'all are hilarious.
I can't believe he won't. He knows he can't answer. Is based on what you just read. Yeah.
Just
Okay.
like every other Satanist or whatever.
Run away if you touch children.
People because they actually debate you.
Run away if you touch
pull back,
children.
and that's fine.
That's fine. You could run away.
care.
Everyone's going to know that you touch children if you run.
No. I'm not running away. I'm just not going to be muted.
Oh,
I'm not going to be muted.
No, you'll definitely be muted.
I don't give two fucks if I'm muted. I keep unmuting. The thing is, you know that every civilization under that time period had slavery. It has nothing to do with
I don't
God.
care, Nate.
It had to do with people being black.
Nate, you will answer my question or I'll continue to mute you. We're not talking about other civilizations. We're talking about your God. Did your God tell his people that they can own slaves? Yes or no? He must have not realized I muted him this time around.
Show me a verse that says that you are to own slaves. That's what I'm getting at.
See, now he changed the narrative. See how he phrased the question? Show me the verse that shows that you are to own slaves. That would indicate that there is a prescriptive, that they ought to own slaves. That is not what Justin is talking about. Justin is talking about that it is permissible for them to have slaves.
Right. And it's
permissible.
accepted.
It is accepted. It's not saying they have to. It's not saying they ought to. It's saying they can. They're capable of doing it. It's permissible. It's a normative in that sense. And this guy is trying to, oh, no, you need to show me. It's the fact that God is saying, if you want slaves, you can have these Hebrew people as slaves, but there's conditions put on Hebrew slaves. And then when you go to Leviticus 25, when it comes to foreign slaves, those conditions don't apply. It's not a 7th-year release for foreign slaves. Those you can own in perpetuity.
I'll show you that verse, but that's not my question. Before I show you that verse,
No.
Wouldn't it be funny to hear this conversation between him and Praise?
It would be lovely. In fact, I can't wait to watch that video between him and Praise.
What video between him and Praise?
Oh, there's a Peter put a link to the conversation Justin had with Praise about a month ago.
Oh, they did talk.
Yeah.
Where is that?
Go look up at to 5:13 p.m. Gonna go.
Hold on a minute.
Well, fuck that.
Well, I said 5:13, but you're in Michigan. It probably says 6:13 p.m. But that's the link.
3:13. Where is it at?
Okay.
Oh, to the show. Oh, right here. All right. Wait a minute. We might have struck some gold here. All right, we're gonna get
Michigan.
Huh?
I thought you were in Michigan.
No, California.
Oh, okay. For some reason, I thought you were talking about.
Originally from Michigan, but
Okay,
no, I live in
Lansing
California now.
Okay, in a Cadillac.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
got it.
yeah. Because that's where. Yeah, my wife and I are originally from Michigan, but we live in
Gotcha.
California. Yeah, we
And
grew
he
up there
lives
all.
and he lives by the only restaurant that managed to stay open when they raised the minimum wage. Pretty amazing.
Exactly. That's exactly how it works. All right, let me go here. I'll go here. Oh, where's it at?
That's how I knew. That's how I knew where you were, because we were just talking about it.
Okay, here we go. And some woman in underwear and perfume. No. Okay.
What do you mean no?
Oh, Yeah. What do you mean no? Show us, God damn it! Leave it to Peter to find the fucking gems. Yeah, I'm not gonna have time to do. I'll do that one. I'll do that one later. Fuck that. I got too many tabs popping up here. My computer's starting to go. Present. I've got it. Yeah, that's the okay. Okay. This is only 8 minutes long. Oh my God, what did he say?
I hope it was a rage quit.
You can call me Praise. That's fine.
Sure. Praise, are you at least 18 and are you a Christian?
Yes.
All right. And are you pro-slavery?
No.
Okay. Are you aware that the Bible says slavery is chill?
I would argue that it's syntactically impossible to charge the God of the Bible with condoning slavery. Do you know why?
I don't know why, but I'm sure it's not going to be I can't say the word syntactically impossible.
It is. It's something called casuistic law, and then you have apodictic law.
Mm-hmm.
So apodictic law is unconditional law, legislative, normative, regulative laws. Well, it turns out the consensus view by ancient Near East scholars and Hebrew scholars is that the only commandments that are apodictic, unconditional, legislative, regulative laws are the 10 Commandments.
That's
so
not true.
What is that?
That is the historic. So see, Praise is doing the exact same fucking thing. Mm-hmm. That is the history. That is looking at it as to whether or not it was actually applied in any actual sense by an ancient culture. The problem here is that for Praise as a believer, that's not how that works. You're trying to dismiss it as some kind of it's kind of like basically trying to how do you put that? How do you put that? I'm blanking on the saying. Anyway, he's done this a lot because that is something that scholars talk about. That's something that he talked about on his video where he says, well, yeah, but when you look at it, they didn't actually do this. These were just hypotheticals, right? He actually said that in his video. He said, well, casuistic laws are purely hypothetical. They're not prescriptive, which is actually false because if this, then that, right? So there is a hypothetical nature to a casuistic because there is that if that happens, but the then is the prescriptive. Right. So the problem is whether or not these casuistic things were actually implemented by that nation. That's separate from you believing God exists, really exists. God really talked to his people. Square that fucking circle. Yeah. Praise does this all the time. It is the most disingenuous bullshit ever. He does it all the fucking time.
I get that.
That is true.
That's bullshit.
I'll give you citations.
I quite literally just talked to an actual scholar in the field a week ago that disagrees with that, and I know a dozen more that also disagree with that.
Legislative laws, normative laws.
Right. Okay. So, what does the Bible say happens if you don't follow these letters to the T?
That it's descriptive that there would be punishments.
So there's punishments if you don't follow the laws. Okay. So does God want you to follow the laws or not?
Yes, we ought to follow the laws.
Okay, so then your nonsense talking point, how the laws are somehow suggestions, is I absolutely know what I'm talking about. So
I'm the authority.
I'm the authority. No, Praise, you're missing the context. You're talking from a historical context. He's talking from the theological one. He's
talking from the we apologists can't defend slavery. We have to deny slavery.
Yeah. Well, it doesn't mean that they actually did this shit. It doesn't matter. Do you believe these are actually God's words? Yes. There you go.
I know you're talking
it literally says,
or are you just simply saying that these particular words here are from people who just made up shit and said it was from God? Is that what you're saying? Yes. So these are lies. Are you saying that the Old Testament laws are lies? They're just pure conjecture.
Lies. Dirty lies.
And there's always an explanation, call it hermeneutics or whatever, to get around it, because when you read it, it doesn't sound good. So you have to have something else.
Of course.
What you need to know is
Exactly.
In the book of Exodus.
I blame Dr. Josh for teaching praise that bullshit. And then not, but Dr. Josh has actually, he's said that before. He goes, yeah, there's an issue here though. That's looking at it from a historical, like looking at the narrative in a historical sense, not in the theological sense, because theologically, if you believe this all, there we go.
Chapter 18, Moses answered him, because the people came to me to seek God's will, whenever they have a dispute, it is brought to me, and I decide between the parties and inform them of God's decrees. Oh, sorry, that wasn't the one I was looking for. Let me find the actual one I was looking for. Let's see.
You're preaching right now. I want.
Oh no, I'm not preaching.
That's not preaching. That's not preaching praise. Preaching is different. Reading scripture is not preaching.
Yeah.
Preaching is when a pastor stands up or some kind of evangelist reads scripture and then they paraphrase it to kind of spin some kind of dogma. That's preaching.
Then they tell a story, they read a poem, and then they pound the pulpit and then call the music leader up for an altar call. That's preaching.
Yeah. Well, woman in underwear. Did I post the wrong link? Don't show my girlfriend. No, it was a commercial.
I'm actually going to read you from the Bible.
What's that?
No, I think that was Justin.
Oh, okay.
What it says.
I just gave you a fact of ancient.
No, you didn't. You gave me an opinion.
You want me to give you citations?
You gave me an opinion. You gave me an opinion of one particular scholar. No, you didn't. This is
you a consensus viewpoint.
It's not a consensus viewpoint. This is Leviticus 25:18.
Actually, Justin, I have to disagree with you. What he gave you is technically a consensus viewpoint, but it doesn't do for him what he wants it to do. Yeah. That's the problem. He thinks it's doing something for him. It does not. It puts praise outside of his faith.
He thinks by using the word casuistic or case law versus apodictic or whatever, that he can, that's making a difference. That's denying Justin, the point he's trying to make when it's not.
What exactly is the difference there? I don't understand the difference.
Okay, apodictic. Sometimes he says it as apodictic. I used to do the same thing. I would slip into it. So it's apodictic. So apodictic are you shall, like when it says you shall have no other gods before me. Like they're straight up commands. Do not commit murder. Do not commit adultery. Those are apodictic. Casuistic, the casuistic laws that he's referring to are, if you do this, then this should happen. So
it's almost like today's equivalent of well, here's the statute. Think casuistic. Here's the statute, and then here's the court rendering, the court decision.
If you drive 90 miles, if the speed limit is 65 miles an hour and you are caught driving 90 miles an hour, then you will receive some kind of citation or some kind of judicial punishment, whatever. It's an if then this. So if this particular case happens, then this thing is to follow. Apodictics are just straight up, don't do that. You don't do that, or you will have no other gods before me. That's an apodictic.
Are those like more like your capital crime versus, like a misdemeanor or something? Is that more what it is?
Well, no. If you,
to God, in the eyes of God.
No, not necessarily, because if you strike a man and he should die, you are to die. Okay. Then you are to be killed. So that's a casuistic. It still carries the same thing as death. Right. If a man is caught with a woman, if man and woman are caught having sex outside the bonds of marriage, they are to be taken outside the city and stoned to death or killed or something like that. That's a casuistic. Still carries a capital offense of death, but it's just under a casuistic case.
Yeah, and it's just a matter of the kind of grammar that's being used. Like as it said before, one's done in a subjunctive mood and another's done in indicative mood with not interrogative. What's the imperative?
Well, that's one
imperative mood. Imperative mood. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's an imperative.
The grammar used to state the law. It's not really so big a difference that it disqualifies you from being able to say that they practiced actual slavery.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's something that's brought up in Dr. Josh's book. He expands on that in the second edition, because it's like scholars wonder whether or not they actually, that's the historical thing, is where they go, well, did they actually use this as any kind of real way of governing their society? Some scholars are of the position, no, they did not.
So his argument is that God didn't command slavery, so it goes under
it's a casuistic,
the casuistic one.
Yeah, because
but what makes the difference though?
Well, because in Praise's mind, casuistic cannot be prescriptive. Okay. Praise has it locked in his head that he's locked into, it's purely hypothetical, not prescriptive in any way. He said that in his video that I was going to look at, or that I'd looked at in the past. He doesn't understand that it does contain a prescriptive. It has it. If the hypothetical condition apply, if the hypothetical situation if that happens, then this is to occur. There's the prescriptive. So he's got it confused in his head. He thinks that the casuistic, he just thinks a casuistic is a purely hypothetical thing that no one would have ever used in any real way. So everything that everything that you're supposed, at least according to Praise, anything that you're reading about God telling Moses that if this, then that, is not anything that they actually did. It was nothing they ever did. It was nothing that God ever told them that was okay. It was all pure. It was just pure hypothetical.
So the rules for slavery are still from God. Is that where it is?
Nothing about case law, nothing about casuistic or whatever.
He's trying to
do with it coming from God or not.
Yeah, he's trying to remove God's responsibility from that narrative.
Exactly, right.
Even
but
though
there is a direct line to God, right?
Yeah, the narrative specifically states that this is God telling Moses about these things to tell to the Israelites. That's why, like I said, Nicola and I are very much in agreement that we think that Praise is like, he's functionally illiterate. He has a really hard time with with really understanding that in the context of these narratives, this is God telling Moses to tell Israel, this is what you can and cannot do and are able to do.
Well, you explained it to me in a couple minutes, Jay, so maybe you're just a better explainer. Maybe you need to explain it to him.
We've tried. Dr. Josh has spent hours with him. Okay. And he's still coming out with the same bullshit.
Well, yeah, the way you explain it, and it's like, okay, there's still a line to God, so he's not getting God out of it. So I got it.
Because he wants to use that. Oh, I can appeal to the scholars when they're doing this historical critique and use that historical critique as a way of saying, well, God never would have done this anyway. This isn't realistic to God's nature in any way, shape, or form. Then the narrative isn't true to God's nature. So anything that we're now reading in these texts about God having communication with his people through Moses or through anybody else should just be dismissed. It was all purely hypothetical. There's no meat to that in any way, shape, or form. He's literally making the Old Testament an error, a hypothetical, or not an error, but more like a hypothetical exercise that went nowhere. Gotcha. It was just God blowing hot air. It was just God basically saying, well, if this could ever happen, then this would happen. But that didn't ever really happen. But then when you go to Jeremiah 34, it has Jeremiah communicating to the people of Israel, hey, you remember what God said about having your fellow Israelites as slaves? Yeah, you can't do that anymore. And the reason why I'm saying you can't do that anymore is because I made a covenant with you guys that when you had your fellow Israelites as slaves, you were to release them on the 7th year. But you guys haven't been fucking doing that. So now, no more Israelite slaves. No more Israelite servants for you. And then later on in Jeremiah 34, they went back. They said, okay, God, we agree with you. And they released all of their fellow Israelites who were under indentured servitude. But then later on in the narrative, they forced them all back. And then God got even more mad. What did I fucking tell you? And what praise will do is go, see in Jeremiah 34, God's against slavery. No, he wasn't. He was against the fact.
Was that just the Hebrew slaves?
Yes.
So the rest of them, the foreign still stayed slaves, right?
Correct. Okay. And yeah.
Now observe my statutes and faithfully keep my ordinances so that you may live on the land securely. Does he say to observe the statutes faithfully? Did he say to observe? Did he say to observe?
No, the people did, not Yahweh. The only laws that we can extrapolate to Yahweh are the 10 Commandments.
That's
that were
bullshit.
Written.
You're lying. You're lying. But if you will not obey me and do not observe all of it, if you
talking about,
I'm reading.
Yeah, he has to. Yeah, and so that's the problem here. He doesn't understand enough of Praise's history. He's just going to basically assert. We're talking about theology here. We're talking about your belief that this God is actually doing this, and is not going to go anywhere with Praise. Praise is dead set on this. In fact, he's made money, at least to some extent, from selling a bullshit book on Amazon. Literally spouting this same shit.
How did his book compare to Standing for Truth's book? You know, that had all the mistakes in it and the hyperlinks. Just
I think it structurally. So now narrative. Now, as far as like writing style and everything, that I don't know. But if I remember correctly from seeing Standing for Truth's first book, or maybe it was the second one, it's way more coherent. The way that Praise ended up submitting his document to Amazon so it could become a Kindle, it didn't format it correctly. So you would get whole paragraphs as like just one continuous sentence. No, nothing. It was just a garbled up mess. It was horrible. It was terrible. But like I said, I think I got from someone the actual PDF copy of his book. So the PDF copy is obviously structured the way it's supposed to be, or the way he wanted it to be. But it was when he submitted that to Amazon, it didn't translate. But like I read earlier when I was reading Dr. Josh's critique, he would list multiple citations as one large paragraph, as though that was making his argument for him.
So it's just references to publications?
Yes.
Is his argument. Oh, he doesn't understand argument.
He did that multiple times in the book, but there's a lot of problems with his book. Lots and lots and lots. Yeah. What I read from Dr. Josh was him only skimming the surface of it. There's so many problems with that shit. It's not even funny.
Well, I guess people still buy it because he's already got a following.
I'm reading the Bible. I'm reading to the Bible to you. I need you to stop spazzing out. All right. You're not going to crash out for Christ tonight. It says, but if you do not obey me and do not observe all of these commands, what commands is he referring to? Why is God going to punish you if you don't follow the commands? If they're merely suggestions?
Where's that Jeopardy music?
I prefer the girl from Ipanema. Is it Ipanema?
Ipanema. That's a good one too.
Ipanema. I like that. Yeah. Do. Only I like doing it like was it Jim Carrey and Cable Guy? Yeah, it's creepy, but anyway.
There are so many different versions of that song.
Yeah.
It's been covered.
He doesn't know how to unmute himself or he's still talking.
Or he's peeing his pants and having to change.
Oh, there he is. Okay, so when he says, if you do not obey me and do not observe all of these commandments, what commandments is he talking about?
That's casuistic.
What commandments is he talking about? What commandments?
These are
commandments?
Extrapolations from the society. Yahweh didn't write that.
Oh, so the Old Testament's not from God.
Yep.
Only the 10 commandments are.
Okay, so Leviticus 26 and 25, when it says that God spoke, God didn't speak.
These people
Oh.
are writing extrapolations what they thought that the Lord
Did God
was
say
writing in
this?
the Ten
Did
Commandments.
God
Yeah.
say if you follow my statutes and keep my
Not directly,
commandments?
no.
And
No.
so God didn't say any of this.
No, they
So
were
it's all made up.
extrapolations.
Let's hold it real quick. Let's pause real quick.
Yeah.
What was Praise's explanation there? It was kind of hard to hear that these are people writing down what they thought God said.
Yep. They and they were coming up with like
Oops.
hypotheticals that they didn't actually ever follow. So they never, but then what he'll do is he will turn around and he will go to other parts of the Old Testament and say that these are things that actually occurred historically. So once you start doing that, you start trying to figure out, well, wait a minute, what is it about Jeremiah? Like I said before, like Jeremiah 34, here we have a narrative where God is basically talking. There's no issue there's no issue of this hypothetical, right? There's no if this, then that kind of thing going on. This is Jeremiah 34, and God is basically talking to his people through Jeremiah that, hey, remember when I told you could have Hebrew slaves, but you had to release them on the 7th year? You haven't been doing that, so now no more of that. And he misses that entire thing completely. So now if you do that with him, he will flame the fuck out.
Yeah.
Because now what we have is a narrative that is based on these casuistic laws that he says are just these people writing what God thought he wanted. But you have Jeremiah stating, or at least in Jeremiah, where God is speaking to Jeremiah saying, I made a covenant with you, Israel, about this shit with your forefathers about doing this. And it was fine until you abused it. Now no more. So Praise hasn't squared that circle yet. He hasn't figured that the fuck out yet. But what he did square it, but the way he squared it was by saying, when you read this narrative, that's God clearly being in opposition of slavery. He completely reads it the wrong way. His dogma and his biases are so ingrained, he cannot read that shit with fresh eyes.
Yeah, he's all ed up with dogma.
He cannot have a God that condoned slavery or endorsed slavery. He cannot have the Israelites, which he has used the presentism fallacy of Israel being a melting pot nation that was going in to free this part of the world from the horrible terrorists that were causing all sorts of strife in that area. Him and Jill were actually trying to sell me on that shit. That Israel was going into the land of Canaan because Canaan was a den of Al-Qaeda or Taliban and shit like that. And they were going in being God's shock troops and taking out the evil terrorists and allowing those that were willing to come to them and become part of their melting pot nation, and everybody would live in harmony. I kid you fucking not.
Yeah.
These guys are fucking crazy.
That's what dogma does to you.
Yep.
They were
Okay, so you heard it. It's all made up. It's all fiction.
You're not listening.
Okay, so none of the commandments were given by God other than the 10.
The only ones that were directly handed down by Yahweh are the 10 commandments.
Okay, so Leviticus is lying.
No. The ones that were directly, he completely has that wrong. Again, there's the context and the fact that originally God was going to speak to the people of Israel himself and have them assemble, and they chickened the fuck out and said, Moses, you do it. You talk to this guy. Moses talks to God, writes it all down, and then starts conveying it to the people of Israel. There was nothing about these 10 commandments being directly passed down by God to the Israelites. They still came the same way as the casuistic ones. They went from God to Moses to the people of Israel. Why? Because the Israelites were too chicken shit to hear from God themselves. It's right there in the text.
No.
Yes.
These are laws written by Jews that they were extrapolating from the 10 commandments.
That's not what the Bible says. The Bible says the Lord spoke to Moses on Mount Sinai, saying, "Speak to the Israelites and say to them, when you enter the land that I am."
Tell me what casuistic.
It says the Lord spoke to Moses on Mount Sinai, saying.
See, this is what I like about this. This is sticking This is him sticking his feet to the fire. And I don't know why Praise is appealing to that whole, this is syntactical. Is this a this is a proposition. The Lord spoke to Moses on Mount Sinai saying, speak to the Israelites and say to them, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
Is that proposition a true proposition or a false proposition? Law of excluded middle, Praise, go.
Mm-hmm.
Speak to the Israelites and say to them, when you enter the land that I am giving you, so on and so forth. So this is very easy. When Leviticus says that Yahweh said something,
This is casuistic law.
when the book says that Yahweh said something, does it mean that he said it?
They were extrapolations from the Ten Commandments.
Does it say that Yahweh spoke?
According to the Jews, yes, but he
Okay,
did not
so
directly
is
speak it.
the book true?
Yes, it is true.
Okay, so
from
then
their
it must be true that Yahweh spoke to the Israelites on Mount Sinai and gave them the law code.
Only the 10 Commandments.
Okay,
were.
then show me in the Old Testament where God said, I only give you these 10 commandments and the rest is bullshit.
It's called syntactical. You know what syntactical Hebrew is?
This will not save you. So the book says that God spoke something. Did God
Look it up
did God
yourself.
speak it or not?
Google search.
I don't need Google. I have 2 degrees in the field of study. I know exactly
You know
what you're talking about. I'm asking you.
You suck.
Yeah, he knows that's syntactical.
Thank you so much, Peter, for that. Oh,
That's
my
like right
God.
out of the water, boy.
Oh,
You suck.
I got 2 degrees in studying this. You suck.
He's the first fundamentalist I've ever heard deny that anything in the book of Exodus wasn't from God, but it was from Jews who were interpreting the 10 Commandments. Nobody says that. How desperate do you have
I
to
never
be
heard it.
to come up with that kind of idea about textual authority?
The one I always hear is no matter what God did, it was good. And even if it wasn't good, like slavery, then eventually there would be goodness come out of it. That's usually how I hear they argue around it.
Yeah. So the term syntactical just refers to anything related to syntax, which is the set of rules, principles, and structures that govern how words and phrases are arranged to form sentences in a language. So when he's using that, he's basically saying he's appealing to the rules of language for, I guess, Hebrew, the Hebrew language, which, by the way, you guys, did you know that he doesn't think that Hebrews are Israelites? Praise
Sure, why not?
He holds to the idea that Hebrew means Habiru, and a Habiru were Egyptians who were attached to the Israelites as they were coming out of Egypt.
Well, Praise is a young earth creationist, right?
Of course.
Yeah, we'll see. They'll swallow a lot of things.
But one thing that I've always wanted, I don't know if anyone's ever asked him this, tell me something. If Israelites aren't Hebrews, because he actually said this in his last video, that Hebrews are mixed Egyptians, or basically rogue Egyptians, right? Then why is it that the Bible is written in Hebrew? Why is there a Hebrew Bible if those are Egyptians? Why is it that the Israelites speak Hebrew if it's Egyptian?
Just have something with Moses being from Egypt or something?
No. But the best thing about it is he creates a redundancy because he creates Habiru. He makes Habiru. Habiru is just, for the most part, just means like mercenary or vagabond or something like that. It's no different than the word pirate or mercenary. It's a generalized term. It's not a proper term. It's definitely not considered a gentilic, which would be like Egyptian or Israelite. So what he's doing is he's saying there's 2 gentilics for these types of Egyptians. They're Hebrew Egyptians. These mixed Egyptians that were attached to the Israelites also carried the same the gentilic Hebrew. So they're Hebrews and Egyptians. He is royally fucked up in the head.
Yeah, this is all. It's like, okay, so this group comes with you. They're called Hebrew Egyptians or whatever, and you go to Israel, you're not an Israelite, but sooner or later, over the years, they start speaking your language all over the country, and they start writing their scriptures in it. It doesn't matter. We're talking about the language and not the ethnicity of the people.
Yeah, but that's his way. That's his way of getting around the idea that when it says, "As for your male and female Hebrew, as for your Hebrew slaves, you may only have them for 6 years, and on the seventh, you can have them for 6 years, and on the seventh year, you release them." Right. So he has an apologetic for that. Hebrew isn't referring to Israelites. So Israelites never would have actually. There was no indentured servitude for Israelite.
Oh, so he's denying Israelites don't enslave Israelites.
Yeah, there's no Israelite on Israelite indentured servitude. The problem is there is, because when you go to Leviticus 25, that doesn't even mention Hebrew. That talks about Israelites. And in that context, the Israelites that are indentured to other Israelites do not get released on the 7th year. They don't get released until the 50th year. So the 7th year release that's talked about in Deuteronomy and in Exodus is called the sabbatical year. Yeah. The Jubilee was every 50 years. So when it says, when some people will do this, they'll say, well, yeah, it'll happen on the Jubilee, the 7th year. Nope, that's the sabbatical year. Jubilee didn't happen until every 50th year. So the one in Leviticus 25 is far longer. Israelites could be indentured servants to other Israelites for 49 years. But
locked in. That's pretty locked in.
Yep, but they were to be treated as hired workers, and if they were redeemed, they could go out, and then there was some way of apportioning their wages and shit. And then it goes on later on, and then it says, but as for your male and female slaves, those you may purchase from the nations around you. Mm-hmm. That's Leviticus 25, 44 through 46. It makes the distinction within the entire fucking narrative. And for all of these idiots, they all just blow right over it. They know what it says. They know what it says.
Ultimately, they can't find abolition in there, though, right? Not even in the New Testament.
What abolishment from? What do you mean? I don't mean
slavery. Because Jesus spoke about slaves obey your masters and everything, right?
I think that was from Paul, but yeah, there's no mention of no one being able to. I think that's from Paul. Either way, it doesn't matter. There's nothing, as far as I understand. Yeah, there is no literal prohibition against slavery throughout the entire either the Old Testament or the New Testament.
Okay.
At all. And the reason why Paul never really spoke out against slavery was because Paul was of the agreement that the coming of Jesus was happening within their lifetime. So there was no real reason to upset the status quo. All of that shit was going to be, the apple cart was going to be upturned there any moment. But it never happened.
When the Bible says something, does it mean what it says?
You are lying.
When the Bible says something, does it mean what it says? This is not difficult.
10 commandments are only epidemic.
That's not an answer to my question. When the Bible says something.
Now, that's a mistake that he's making as well. When he says the 10 commandments are the only ones that are apodictic. Praise in his video, the one that he did on claiming that atheists came up with biblical slavery, brings up 2 extra apodictic laws. It's in Matthew, I think it's in Matthew 16, where basically the Pharisees asked Jesus, what are the greatest commandments? And Jesus says, love God with all your heart, mind, and soul, something like that, and love your neighbor as yourself. On these 2 laws hang on these 2 commandments hang all the law of the prophets. So what Jesus is basically saying is these are the conditions, these are basically where all the other laws kind of revolve around, is these kind of 2 overarching principles: loving God with all your heart, mind, and soul, or whatever, heart, mind, and body, or whatever, and loving your neighbor as yourself. And when it says neighbor, it doesn't mean fucking foreigner. It doesn't mean someone from
That's what I was just going to ask you.
it means a brother. It means a fellow. Now, obviously, there were considerations that were given to sojourners that were residing amongst the Israelites at the time in the Old Testament. But this particular thing was a gentilic. I think in this sense, it's meant to be gentilic. It's referring to their own, to Israelites. So, but either way, there isn't just the 10, because praise is now praise. This was from how long ago? 1 month ago. So this was around the same time that he did the video up claiming that atheists came up with biblical slavery. He is now lying to Justin. He brought up two extra apodictic laws. And those two are the basis for the other 10. But those other 10 aren't the only apodictic laws either. Thou shalt not suffer a witch to live is also apodictic. And there's many others that are kind of laced all within there.
That's about as apodictic as you can get.
Yeah.
Something doesn't mean what it says.
I destroyed Josh Bowen, by the way.
No, you didn't. He would roast you absolutely alive. All right, so
I destroyed your buddy.
Okay,
Josh.
so you're not going to respond to this.
He did. See, now you know praise. Now I know praise is really turned.
Yeah, now he's just taking his what passes for a penis out of his pants and he's waving it around.
Yep. He's pissing on the bar. He's pissing on the bartender. He's pissing on everything but the fucking glass.
I told
so
you.
You're not going to respond to. Okay, so when it says that God spoke it, it's not true. God didn't speak it.
He did not directly speak it.
Okay,
only
so
the 10
then it's fiction.
No, it's not fiction because it's extrapolation.
It is fiction. No, it says that God said something, and you're telling me that God didn't say it.
He did not directly say.
Okay, so then whoever wrote this out lied.
They're descriptive, not prescriptive.
Whoever wrote this out,
it doesn't matter if it's prescriptive or it's descriptive at this particular point. Praise. It's a matter of the law of excluded middle, where you get to the idea where is a proposition. A proposition is either true or it's false. Is that proposition true? He's the one that's like, I know logic. I'll fucking school your ass in logic.
New denomination. Praise is now the head of the first extrapolationist church of the Lion God. It's extrapolation.
God equals is great. Praise is having a wine and cheese party. Oh yeah.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah. Yeah, the messenger reveal says, I always thought Hebrews were males who make beer. Da-dung-ching. You better not say that. Don't say that around praise, messenger. Praise will accuse you of being an anti-Semite, like he accused Dr. Josh and me.
Please read my book.
No one's reading your book. No one cares. Okay, try this again.
No one's reading your book.
They always want to have their cake and eat it too. The minute they start engaging in scholarship.
Wait, did he actually kick him? Oh, he should have waited till he left on his own. Maybe he did.
No.
They want to say, oh, these laws weren't actually normative, which is why, of course, in the book, God says over and over again that if you don't follow these laws, I will rain fire on you. You will eat your own children if you not to observe these laws to the nth degree. And of course,
in other words, God's saying, I will eat your face.
Of course, the fact that people couldn't do it is the same reason why God had to send Jesus. You invalidate the entire narrative of Christianity the minute you say that these laws weren't normative.
There's no fucking way.
You know
Exactly.
what? You know what? That was the reason he did his video. Let me see here. November 7th, 2024. So let's go. Yeah, I'm going to close that down. Let's see, what do I got showing here? Okay.
So did Praise do some sort of response video or something?
No, I think because I was wondering why Praise did that video. So because he did the video, the biblical slavery is an invention of the atheists, or the atheists made it up. And I'm like, well, this seems kind of weird. Why? This seems to be coming out of nowhere. He must have had and in my mind, I was thinking he must have had a conversation with someone where somebody pissed in his hush puppies.
Yeah.
And that, I believe, what Peter shared with us is the video. Because
the triggering event.
No. Because this was streamed live on October 21st, 2024. That video was November 7th. Oh, so yeah. So this one's almost 2 months old now. So no, that wasn't the video that spurned his claim that biblical slavery is an invention of the atheist. Praise loves me. I wrecked Praise in our last debate. What did you guys, Messenger, what did you guys debate? I think I remember getting a notification. Wait, where was that? I remember seeing something for that. Was that on Standing for Truths? Is that on SFT's channel or something like that?
I saw him and Grayson had a debate.
Oh, what, Praise and Grayson?
Yeah.
Yeah, they've talked multiple times. That goes over like a fart in a car. I remember a while back. I think I was drinking. It's about the only time I would ever go in there is if I was drinking. And I went in there and they were talking about evolution. Standing for Truth was there, and then they kind of like mockingly like, yeah, well Jay's here. He believes that we're related, that he's related to a strawberry. And I was like, what are you talking about? Yeah, you're related to a strawberry, aren't you? Aren't you an Evo tart or blah blah blah? And I was like, don't you guys think everything's related? And they went, no. And I went, isn't everything made by God? Well, yeah. Oh.
Oh, that's deep.
Oh, it was free will, him pro, me con. It was another lesser known channel. I thought I saw something about that. Wait, I wonder if Praise ever, I wonder if he shared it on his channel. Maybe I saw it on Praise's, in his videos or something. Maybe he mirrored it on his channel or something. Yeah, but I think I might shut this down here. I've been on for 2 hours, but yeah, because going over, if I went over the Praise channel with you guys would be like, what the fuck? That one's just incredible. But like I said at the beginning, Praise's claim that atheists invented biblical slavery is hilarious because he gives his why, what he thinks is the why, but he doesn't explain how. And the way he goes about kind of like trying to show how the atheists are misinterpreting or not using a proper hermeneutic when reading the scripture seems to be that the atheists didn't intentionally invent biblical slavery. They just can't read it right. So that's where the invention of biblical slavery comes from.
God glasses are broke.
Yeah,
but the Christian slave owners used the Bible and used the Old Testament to justify keeping slavery in America. So how can they say the atheists invented it?
Well, only in the sense of the biblical slavery, not slavery as a whole. Just biblical slavery. The idea that God is condoning, that God is endorsing slavery. I don't like to use the term condone because they get worked up about it, but it's the idea that God would endorse slavery. And if for Praise and even Jill, it's offensive to even think that the Israelites, God's chosen people, would even participate in such a barbarous thing. And bear in mind that these are two idiots that basically think that in order for slavery to take place, kidnapping is necessary. So the idea of owning a person as property can only happen if you first steal the person.
Huh.
You have to take them against their will. Then, only then, is there slavery. You can't have a system. If you have a system where the concept of property and rights of ownership is applied to a human being, even in the case that somebody goes, hey, look, I'm insolvent. I need to liquidate something. I'm going to liquidate myself as property to you. So I become your property and basically work for nothing for a particular period of time until I'm somehow free of debt, right? To basically work this off. That to them is not slavery, because the person is volunteering to become property. And because there's no abuse and there doesn't necessarily have to, there has to be kidnapping, and there has to be abuse, there has to be the oppression. But most people would argue that the idea that a human being would even lower themselves from another person to the level of property, to a lower to that standard in a society where they're considered movable property, would be considered oppressive in and of it, just on its own. So they don't seem to think that, especially Jill. Jill made up the argument that if Veckel wanted to be my property, it wouldn't. I could write up a contract now. And me and Cerberus argued with him that no law you couldn't enforce it. There's no way that you could do it here in the United States. And he said, yeah, but you got to show me a law that says that I can't do that. And I said,
there was also the tag on there too, that even when the male slave was set free at the 7 years, if he took a wife or had a child, they still remained property, right?
Yeah. If he went in with a wife, if he went in with a wife and children, then he went out with his wife and children. But if he went in and he was given a wife by his master and had children with that woman, then yeah, he left, but they stayed. They were the property of the master. Yeah, that's correct.
It's still kind of, well, yeah, we let he let one go, but he kept two. You know what I mean? It's a net gain, right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That was the way that you could get slaves, was you could reproduce, right? You could get these people you could get a fellow Israelite and then give them a wife for a time, and then they would have, I guess, that kind of marital right, which was odd, but they could have children with that woman, and then that would increase his property.
And in 7 years, I mean, technically, 4 or 5 kids, no problem.
Yeah. There's also the one,
well, I guess there would be a problem. There was a lot of childbirth problems, but theoretically, they could have a lot of kids.
Okay. In the NRS BUE. Hold on a second. I'm looking something up. So, so here's one that's really funny. This is one of those ones that there's no casuistic that's given here. This is just a narrative, and this is from Elisha and the widow's oil. This is from 2 Kings 4, 1-7. Now the wife of a member of the company of prophets cried to Elisha, "Your servant, my husband, is dead. And you know that your servant feared the Lord, but a creditor has come to take 2 children as slaves, or take my 2 children as slaves." Elisha said to her, "What shall I do for you?" Tell me, what do you have in the house? She answered, your servant has nothing in the house. I said Elisha, not Alexa. Fuck off. Um, fucking Alexa. Your servant has nothing in the house except a jar of oil. He said, go outside, borrow vessels from all your neighbors, empty vessels, and not just a few. Then go in and shut the door behind you and your children and start pouring into all these vessels. When each is full, set it aside. So she left him and she shut the door behind her and her children. They kept bringing vessels to her and she kept pouring. When the vessels were full, she said to her son, bring me another vessel. But he said to her, there are no more. Then the oil stopped flowing. So apparently this is almost like a Jesus miracle, right? She had a jar of oil, but it was able to fill a bunch of other vessels. It doesn't say how large this oil was, right? It says she had nothing in the house except a jar of oil. And then Elisha goes, have a bunch of people bring you their empty vessels. And she kept filling them up. It's almost like a loaves and fishes kind of thing, right? Once all the vessels, then the oil stopped flowing. She came and told the man of God, and she came and told the man of God, and he said, go sell the oil and pay your debts, and you and your children can live on the rest. They were going to take her children as slaves. The creditors were coming to take her children. So it's interesting, this narrative, when the husband died, his debts were not forgiven upon his death. They passed to his wife and his children so they could collect the children as collateral by force. She had no choice. She had to give them something in replacement. So
that's the way I understood it. Yeah, there was always something where no, in the end they were still having slaves. Yeah.
Yeah. They were going to come and take those kids. And that was, Elisha's like, okay, well, let's see what we can do here. Right? He didn't say, oh no, they can't take your kids. You can't come and take kids as slaves. That was perfectly fine. Those kids were collateral on that loan, on those loans, or on whatever debt that husband had, and they were not forgiven upon his death. Which is interesting, right? Because the husband dies and the woman.
The kid's not under a 7-year thing either, right? That they become a permanent slave, right?
I don't know about if they're males. I don't know if they're at that time. Yeah, I don't know, because so in Exodus you have a reworking of you have a kind of a reworking of it, because in Exodus it has male Hebrew slaves go out on the 7th year, but the female Hebrew slaves did not. An Ahmad did not go out on the 7th year like the males did. But in Deuteronomy, it did. In Deuteronomy, it says both male and females go out on the 7th year. And the other thing that Deuteronomy added that Exodus didn't include was the fact that on the 7th year, when they are to be let out of to go free, the master is to give them certain provisions so that they don't fall back into destitution and therefore back into indentured servitude again. But it's not in Exodus. So it's kind of weird. But like I said, Deuteronomy is like Exodus 2.0, because a lot of what happens later on in Deuteronomy with the whole 10 Commandments is very similar to the narrative in Exodus. It's really kind of funny. But a lot of people like to say, oh no, it's Exodus, it's Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and then Deuteronomy. And Deuteronomy is kind of like just a retelling of Exodus. It's not a finalization. So
I was just covering somebody that wants America to return to the laws of one of the books was Deuteronomy, and I was like, oh yeah. Looked up a few of them, and it's like, oh yeah, sounds great. That's what we want. All right.
Yep. So with that, it's now 2 hours and 14 minutes in. I'm going to shut this down. I got to get a couple hours of sleep because I've got to work late tonight. It's another reason why I don't do a lot of streams anymore. I work night shift now, so.
Yeah, it's hard to get proper sleep when you work night shift.
Thanks for learning me a few things. Appreciate it.
Yep. Yeah, I remember I used to always, I would make that mistake. Even after I read Dr. Josh's book, I missed that little detail about the whole Jubilee thing. And I would still argue and be like, oh no, they released on the 7th year, which is the year of Jubilee. It's like, no.
When you said that, Dr. Josh's bow tie would twirl because you got it wrong.
Yeah, especially after I've read now I've read that book. I've read that one. I read that one 3 times, the first edition. I'm halfway through the second edition, which is a lot lengthier, but it's still just as good.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a little more meat on that one. But yeah, because every time somebody wanted to debate or was even talking about debating me on let's debate the slavery issue in the Old Testament, and I would go, all right, let's see what happens. But just to be on the safe side, I'd sit at work, bring the book, and I'd read it. I'd set Audible. I have it on Audible as well, so I'd have it playing at like 1.5 speed, 1.75 speed, because I can read pretty quick that way, and then just listen to it and read it as I went, kind of let everything sink in, so it was nice and fresh for if I was going to do the debate. I asked Dr. Josh one time, I'm like, can I just plagiarize from you if Jill's being stupid? Can I just take like whole swaths from your book and just use them as replies? He goes, do it up, dude. Just do it.
Nice.
And Jill used to say that he's like, I've read Dr. Josh's book. It's full of shit. And I was literally quoting Dr. Josh, but I wasn't using quotations. So they looked like my responses, but they were direct from his book. And then Jill would come back. He goes, oh, I see Dr. Josh has done his damage. You're just going, your arguments you're getting your ideas and your arguments from reading Dr. Josh's liberal scholarship and shit. And I said, and then I wrote back, I thought you said you read that you had Dr. Josh's book, that you read it. Yeah, I read it. I'm like, the last 3 responses were directly from his book. He didn't recognize it at all.
Maybe he skimmed it.
He didn't skim it. He never fucking read it. He lied. One thing I learned about Jill, that guy's a fucking lying piece of shit. He says he's a Christian. He's a lying sack of shit. He lies like a rug. But anyway, that's why I don't cover any of his shit anymore.
I had one run-in with Praise a few years ago, and it was bloody awful. And I said, I'm not stepping in that ever again. That was my last encounter with him. So.
Did you go on his stream?
Yeah.
Yeah,
it was just a bunch of name calling, and it's like, okay, see ya.
Have you ever
about 2 seconds?
The best ones, I can honestly say the best ones are when they're eating. It's what I call when they're eating their own. You will have a mixed bag of different Christians, Christians with different, coming from different, backgrounds, right? Like, right now,
that's what they were doing. Yeah.
Yeah. One of his, like, he likes to get on Veckel because Veckel's a Calvinist. He's changed his position on, I don't know how many things on different, he's got multiple different soteriologies over the years, different eschatologies over the years. And all that is different, like, theories of atonement, theories of salvation, and what it means for the end times and shit. And Praise is just a flake. And if you get someone that's if you get some guy in there that's just assertive enough and just confident enough, he will kind of you can basically, those guys can like sweet talk him into that stuff. Because he didn't used to be a free gracer. He used to be anti-free grace. And then he got in with just enough people that kind of sweet talked him into that free grace thing. Oh yeah, I did the study. I'm like, no, it's only a matter of time before he switches back to something or whatever. And they're just listening to him talk and eat on each other. You go in there and start talking about free grace versus OSAS and all that shit. Then free grace, once saved, always saved, and conditional salvation and all that. They will just eat each other up. Oh, that's not how that works. Oh, that's not how that works. And it's just an incredible amount of it's like it's like people arguing over the rules of a D&D game. It's really kind of, it's like, okay, we're going to set up a D&D campaign and this is what's going to happen. No, I don't want that to happen. And, oh, what do you want this to mean? Oh, I don't want that to mean that. I want it to be this. No, you're wrong. That's got to be this way or this can't work and blah, blah, blah. And it's basically the same kind of bullshit. And it's just like, holy crap, you guys, why don't you just let that go and then just start playing D&D or, play something else? Jesus Christ. Instead of getting so head up over, because the problem with religion is they get so wrapped up in it, they start getting like health food fanatics. They start telling everybody that they need to fucking be that way, and it's like, no, I don't want to eat your cereal. Go away. I don't want that.
If any of them ever got their way and got rid of everybody else they don't like, sooner or later they would sit in on themselves.
Yeah. Yep. I don't disagree, and I've seen it. I've seen it happen in churches that I've attended. So, but with that being said, I am out. Thank you all for joining. Thanks, Scott. Thanks, Dave, for being here.
Appreciate your
hosting.
Jay.
See you guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.